Well, good day to everyone. I hope you're having a great day today. We're excited about today's roundtable, and glad all of you are on. I know in a few more minutes here we'll have some more jump on, but we're going to get started right today. I'm going to ask, let me see here, Frank. Frank, would you open us up in prayer this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're at, and just ask for the Lord's blessing today? I'm excited. Josh is going to be doing the roundtable today, and so this is going to be an exciting day. So Frank, let's pray and ask the Lord to bless this time. Frank, hear me? All right. If you'll unmute yourself, and why don't you pray for us?
Sure. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much, Lord, for the privilege to gather, Lord. And even though we're all over the world, Lord, we thank you, Lord, for the privilege, Lord, that we do have. And Lord, I pray that you just bless us today, Lord, as we gather, Lord, that you would just give us your sweet spirit, Lord, as you always do. And just bless our time, Lord, and make it profitable for your honor and glory. We pray it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It feels like it's been a while, but it's really only been a week. I think because of Idea Night, there's so much going on in the last week that just feels like it's been longer. But Idea Night was amazing. If you did not have the chance to attend at a site in your area, we had an amazing time. And you probably saw the recap and the email that went out this morning. We just had a fantastic time with that. There were a few winners. We had some challenge winners with that. Ashley Jupp won for the delegates with the picture that she posted in the photo challenge. And Graceway Church won for the host challenge, for the photo challenge for the host. So Ashley Jupp won a free Idea Network hoodie, the white one. Everyone says it's very soft. I actually don't have one, but it's got great reviews. And Graceway Church won a free Idea Night host box for 2022, which is $149 value. So we're very excited about that. There were over about 600 delegates there. And a few of you may have heard, this isn't super public knowledge, but we did have 3 sites who had to postpone due to COVID. So they will actually be meeting on October 26th, which we've never done before, having a site postponed, but COVID, that's all we have to say. So that is Ashburn, Virginia, Smith Station, Alabama, and San Antonio, Texas. We'll all be meeting on October 26th. So if you're in that area and you weren't able to go to an event on the 21st, you could actually still jump into a legitimate Idea Night on October 22nd. So we're very excited about those events. But of course, Idea Night officially is over for the majority of us, and we're moving forward. Of course, you all know about our charter members event coming up in January, and Idea Day after that in March, which you all probably saw again in the email this morning with announcing Tampa and Chicago. So very excited about that. Other than that, not too many announcements. We do have a very special guest with us today. He is world famous for his charisma and personality. It is actually our very own Pastor Josh Teis will be leading us in our roundtable today. So I'll turn it over to him now.
I am so glad to be here as the world famous Josh Teis here in my luxurious backyard with the only 3 green plants in the entire city. Today, we're going to have a great conversation. I'd love to have some dialogue with you, specifically about how you plan on setting and achieving your goals in 2022. So let's go ahead and begin with that concept, how to set and achieve goals for the upcoming year. Now is the time to be preparing, obviously, for 2020. October 1st is coming right around the corner. We only have a few days until then, and then you are on a fast track to Thanksgiving and Christmas and the new year. So the big question is, are you setting and achieving ministry goals, and are you prepared for that? A few things that I want to begin as we begin this concept. First of all, I want to begin by explaining point number 1 being don't feel guilty. Why do I say that? Don't feel guilty. Here's why. The danger of goal setting is finding your identity and self-worth in your ability to set and achieve ministry goals. And it's a trap that a lot of people have fallen into. Definitely the ones in this group, probably myself included. We begin to identify ourselves as the one who can achieve goals. We're the ones who find self-reliance and self-importance because of what I've been able to do. And that's a huge, huge trap. So this danger of goal setting and finding your identity and self-worth and the ability to achieve these ministry goals. You don't want to fall into that trap. And because so many have made this mistake, there seems to be a counter movement that almost demonizes the idea of setting ministerial goals. And so even a title like setting and achieving ministry goals, we kind of look at it and be like, I'm not sure that I want to set and achieve ministry goals, because if I do that, I might find my identity in that. And I don't want to find my identity in anything other than Jesus Christ, and maybe my wife and children. Granted, don't fall off that cliff. But in your care to not fall off the cliff, to finding your identity and achieving and setting ministry goals, let's not fall off the other cliff of not setting and achieving ministry goals. So we have to understand that setting goals, this is an actual biblical thing for followers of Jesus Christ. Setting goals and achieving those goals is part of what we're supposed to do. And we see this no more clearly outlined than when Jesus speaks in his Olivet Discourse. If you remember the context of Matthew chapter 24 and 25, it's fascinating. Jesus was walking with his disciples through the temple courtyard, and the disciples were like, Jesus, check out all these big buildings. Isn't it amazing? And I love that they are giving Jesus a tour of the temple. Okay, great. Thank you for pointing all these things out. And Jesus very unimpressed with the temple at the time. In fact, he says specifically something incredibly offensive. He said, there's going to come a day very soon where not one of these stones are going to be left upon another. And it shocks the disciples. It makes them a little upset. Then Jesus and the disciples head away from the temple. They go down the Kidron Valley. They start climbing up the Mount of Olives, the hillside there. And they go to the place where Jesus often spent time alone to pray, and with his disciples, the garden. A garden that not too much farther later, Judas would betray him. And they sit down in the Mount of Olives, and Jesus gives what's called the Olivet Discourse. And it's his last opportunity to really express his thoughts. And the disciples come to him and they say, Jesus, okay, here's the deal. You just talked about in the end times, the last days. When will these end times come? And Jesus says, well, this got to happen and this got to happen. We know the entire Olivet Discourse and all that Jesus sets out in preparation. But what I find fascinating is near the end of his sermon, when his disciples asked about what the end of the world is going to be like, Jesus gives a parable that is incredibly important for us to grasp. And that is this. He said, there were 3 servants and 1 master. The master went away on a long journey, and he left with those servants. 1, he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each one according to his own ability. And immediately he went away on his journey. Well, this is obvious what Jesus is talking about. He himself is the master going on a long journey, and the disciples are the ones with the talents that he leaves behind. He who had the 5 talents, Jesus goes on to tell him, traded with them, and he made another 5 talents. 5 turned into 10. And likewise, he who had 2 talents gained also 2 more. But he who had 1 talent went and dug up the ground and hid his Lord's money. Well, you know how the story ends, right? The master comes back. What was Jesus trying to say? I think it's pretty clear. He just said, one of these days, I'm going to come back at the end of time. Jesus is going to come back. What is he expecting of his disciples when he comes back? What is he expecting of Matthew and Peter? And what is he expecting of all of those that are listening, all of the disciples? The answer is, what I've given you needs to be in turn turned around, and you need to do something with it. How? By turning your 5 into 10 and your 2 into 4. And not sitting back hoping that maybe if you just dig in the ground and set your talent, it'll be fine. I think setting and achieving ministry goals is something that we should not make our identity in, but it is also something we should not feel guilty about. It's not something that we should look at and say, I just feel kind of awkward. Instead, God has sent me on this mission. I'm going to sit here and hopefully he does something, when in fact he is doing something through his body, the church, you. So number 1, set and achieving ministry goals. Don't feel guilty about it. Number 2, if you're going to set and achieve ministry goals, set SMART goals. SMART. SMART. I'm interested. How many of you were able to listen to episode 103 of the Idea Talks podcast, where we talked about setting SMART goals. Would you raise your hand so I can see how many of you actually heard that episode? Good, 2 of you, very good. I'm glad the podcast is reaching. Okay, a few more, very good, all right. If not, go back in. I'm not gonna reteach that lesson, but in there, we talk specifically about setting SMART goals, S-M-A-R-T, specific goals, measurable goals, attainable goals, relevant goals, timely goals. When you're setting goals, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they are not SMART goals. They're not specific. In general, it's like, okay, if my goal for 2022 is to be a better dad, well, that's great. Like, you can be a better dad, but specifically, how do you want to be? I want to be a better pastor. Well, that's great. How do you want to be a better pastor? So is your goal specific? Is it measurable? Can you measure that you actually got to a certain point? What goal is measurable? If I want to be a better father, how many nights of the week am I reading Dr. Seuss to my children? Is it 3 nights a week? Is it 4 nights a week? Is it attainable? Is it possible for you to accomplish this? I want to grow by 45% next year. Well, if last year you grew as the church by 3%, 45% may be unattainable. Is your goal relevant? Is it relevant to what you're doing? If a youth pastor has a goal, my goal is to grow the church by 30%. Well, is that relevant to your specific ministry? Maybe you ought to have a relevant goal to youth ministry. Is it timely? I want to accomplish this goal by this point. So don't feel guilty. Number 2, make them SMART goals. Number 3, categorize your goals. Categorize your goals. This is a huge part of setting and achieving goals, understanding that you have different facets of life, and it's okay to categorize specific goals for the specific facets of your life. So for me, I'm just going to give you things that I do. Maybe you have different facets of life that you need to categorize for. I have multiple areas. Number 1, spiritual goals. Those are always the most important to me. Then relational goals. Relationships are primary and key. I put both of those ahead of what I call professional goals. I do this for my own sake and as a demonstration to the Lord. Lord, I prioritize my spiritual walk and my relationship with others before my professional goals. Then I won't get into these, but financial goals, and then what I call ministerial goals. I differentiate professional goals from ministerial goals. Let me walk you through some of the ones that I've given, just to kind of jog your thoughts on what you might want to do. Why? Because in a moment, I'm going to ask you specifically, have you given yourself 1 full day to pray and write out your goals for 2022? That's what all of this is leading to. Have you given yourself a full day, maybe a half day, to pray and write out your goals for the coming year? So here's a few categories. For me, spiritual goals. This is just to jog your memory or to make you kind of think, oh yeah, maybe I need to have some goals like that. For me, I do a spiritual goal of reading through the Bible every single year. I like different types of Bibles. I like different ways to do it. Right now, I'm listening to an audio Bible that is performed by a bunch of actors, and there's dramatized between. Now, this is not the only Bible reading I do, but I'm getting through the Bible that way. I like different ways to do it. My father would read through the Bible every single year, and it's something that he passed on. Do you have that as a goal? Maybe for you, it's 3 or 4 times this year. Maybe for you, it's reading through the New Testament 4 or 5 times. Maintaining a prayer list every day. Every single day, I'm going to walk through my prayer list. I'm just giving you the ones I do. Obedience to the Holy Spirit. Maintaining purity in my thoughts and actions. Monthly spiritual mentoring with my father. These are some goals that I put out every single. Here are my relational goals. I have relational goals like to my family. I want to take a family day every single week. For my family, I want to have a family vacation every single week. Relational goals, not only for my family, but for myself. For myself, I have a certain goal weight that I want to see when I get on the scale. I have specific goals when it comes to how many days per week I want to work out. 5 days a week, that's my goal for 2021. For Heather, I want to be able to pray with her every single morning. This is one of my goals. I want to have a moment of prayer, even if it's just to grab her hand and pray. Okay, what you say, this isn't about ministry. No. But if you don't have your spiritual goals aligned and your relational goals aligned, how in the world possible are you going to have your ministerial goals and your professional goals fall in? We are first and foremost followers of Jesus Christ, disciples of Jesus. So do you have those goals categorized? Now, for me, I have a few professional goals. For example, one of my professional goals is just to follow my daily schedule. If I'm going to map out my week, am I following my weekly and daily schedule? Develop powerful sermons, read 25 books in the entire year, monthly coaching with Mike Smith, who's my coach, and start my doctoral program. That's one of the things that I'm planning on doing in 2022. Ministerial goals for me, Ministerial goals differentiate from my professional goals. My ministerial goals are things like in 2022, I'm going to give you some of my personal ones just so you understand where I'm at in context. I need to raise $3 million for a church auditorium, which, by the way, leads me to my next question. Does anybody have any money I could have? Anybody? No? All right, let's move on. All right. I have to personally raise $3 million among our church members and our donors. Number two, for my ministerial goals for 2022, I need to average 1,300 in weekly attendance over a 5-service schedule. That's my plan. Number three, I need to stop my doctoral program, put that there as well, because I'm really wanting to do that. Another one is I want to finish writing my book, Happy Thief, which is my next book. So all of those are 2022 goals. I haven't given you all. I'm just trying to jog your thoughts on what you might set out as ministerial goals. Now, before I close out this session, I have two other thoughts. First of all is this: don't feel guilty. SMART goals are the way to go. Categorize your goals so that you can accomplish different goals in different sets of your life. And here are two last thoughts here. Schedule your goal setting day. Schedule your goal setting day. You say, what do you mean by goal setting day? Give yourself one full day to pray and write out your goals. I want to encourage you to have this day set by the end of October. You have about 31, 33 days before the end of October. What day? Go look through your calendar. Be like, this is the day I have least amount of things, but I have 2 meetings, and say, I need to cancel them. Just cancel them. Josh said, cancel them, cancel those meetings. Give yourself a full day to just pray and say, God, what do you want to do in me? And I'm your minister. I am your minister. I'm your shepherd to these people. I'm called to this area. What do you want? And spend the full day, say, God, what do you want from me in 2022? And start brainstorming those. Here's why. Because if you do this in a certain structured time before the next year, your goals will inform your budget and your goals will inform your annual calendar. You cannot establish a budget till you know what your goals are. You cannot establish an annual calendar until you know what your goals are. Both the annual calendar and the budget have to come after your goal setting. But oftentimes what we're doing is we're putting in missions conferences when we're not even sure that that's one of the goals. We're putting in a revival meeting. We're not even sure if that's one of the goals. We're putting in a new discipleship program, but we haven't even talked to God about if that's a major goal for our church this year. We just flip the calendar. Well, we did it last year, so we might as well do it this year. So schedule that one full day to pray and write out your goals by the end of October so that you can then put together an annual calendar. And so then you can build a budget off of your goals and your annual calendar. Two last thoughts as it relates to schedule out your goal setting day. What I like to do now is divide my annual goals into quarterly goals so I can bite off just a few of them. I normally have about 10 goals annually. And I like to say, okay, in the spring, this is what I want to accomplish. I want to accomplish in the winter, for me is December, January, February. I want to accomplish these 2 goals. Well, in the spring, I need to accomplish these things so I can get to my annual goal being finished. And quarterly goals will then obviously inform your weekly 168 schedule. It starts to break down all the way down to what am I doing each quarter and what am I doing each week to accomplish my major goals for the year. And there might be some Q&A on this, so we'll get to that. Well, let me end my before we go to Q&A with this last thought. What have we talked about? We've talked about don't feel guilty. Setting goals is a biblical thing, as long as you're not taking your identity in it. SMART goals are the way to go: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Categorize your goals to be very clear on what you're actually attempting to accomplish. Schedule your goal setting day. If you haven't had it yet, mine was at the very beginning of September 1st. If you haven't had your goal setting day, set it. And lastly, schedule for. This is a real practical idea. That's what this is, idea sharing. This is all about innovation and trying to look forward. Here it is, biggest practical. Schedule for accountability meetings with a coach or a mentor. If you're going to set goals, there's no reason to set goals unless you're going to tell somebody who is going to hold you accountable to those goals. So in 2022, when are your 4 accountability meetings with a coach or a mentor? What I do is I sit with our chairman of the deacons. In our church structure, we are not structured that we are deacon led or the board of directors tells me what I have to do as a pastor. But what I do is quarterly, I submit myself to the chairman of our deacons and I present, these are my annual goals and these are my quarterly goals. And I want you to keep me accountable that I'm going to accomplish these goals. So I schedule. In fact, already in 2022, I have exactly when those meetings are. I've already set it out with Michael McConnell. He's going to sit down with me and we're going to talk through these goals. What I'm doing is I'm giving this person my quarterly goals. Now, you, as the person giving the goals, have the responsibility to report to them on your progress for current goals and future goals. What I'm doing is it's my responsibility to come to that meeting, and I'm going to sit down with them over 90 minutes. I'm going to say, okay, here's where I am right now in the middle of the winter quarter. The winter quarter, I said I wanted to accomplish in the middle of the winter. I wanted to get these things done. Here's my progress on that. This is what I need to do. If you have any advice for me, and they're there to say. Now, again, with my guy, he's like, Pastor, I don't want to control you. I don't want to control your schedule. I say, no, I need somebody to be accountable to. Okay, I want you to ask me the hard questions. He's a successful businessman. He's used to keeping people accountable. I want him to keep me accountable. Now, when do I have these meetings? I put these meetings, and this practical idea, I put these meetings 6 weeks out from the new quarter. So for me, the spring quarter is March, April, and May, which means what? Halfway through the month of April, I am halfway through the spring quarter. So I want to schedule that meeting right there. So my chairman can come to me and I can say, okay, we're halfway through the spring. Here's where my goals are. And here are the goals that I'm thinking about 6 weeks from now when the summer starts. You have any questions? No, I don't want him to set direction or give me vision. I already know what I'm supposed to do from God. I want him to say, are you doing it? How are you doing it? How can I help you do this? What can I help accomplish? All right. So 6 weeks out from the new quarter is when I establish those accountability meetings with my my chairman. Or you could do it with a coach, a mentor, whoever you have. Last thought here under schedule for accountability meetings, celebrate your accomplished goals. When you get a goal accomplished, celebrate. You ought to give yourself a little party. If that literally means, it just means you're buying ice cream for you and your family, and you sit down and you tell the kids, I do this, you should do this. My father used to say, tell the kids, celebrate. Be like, hey, guess what? Daddy's really proud because over the last 3 weeks, we were able to average this amount of people on Sunday morning. That's a big deal for me because I was working for that. You know what? We had 100 visitors, and I've been working for 100 visitors, and our goal was to have 100 visitors by June. We had 100 visitors, and that's why we're going out to Famous Dave's Barbecue. You see? That's the idea. Celebrate the goal. Celebrate for yourself. Celebrate with your spouse. Go out to a movie. Go out to dinner, whatever it might be. But whatever you do, make sure that you're able to celebrate that. That'll give you the motivation necessary to achieve goals in the next few weeks. Well, what Q&A do we have? What questions might you have based upon this? We gave out 5 practical ideas about setting and achieving ministry goals. Let's go to a large Q&A at this point and ask if there are any questions that I might be able to answer. And if there are no questions, if you say I have a lot of questions, then we're going to break up and we're going to talk about this in smaller roundtables. Any cues I might be able to answer with some A's? If so, raise your hand and we'll jump on. I'll jump. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Dan, what's up, Dan?
Oh yeah, maybe it's just me, but hearing your schedule, I mean, it's like, for my personality anyway, it just feels like daunting. Like, you know, how do you not get overwhelmed? I understand that having all those goals and setting all those goals can be freeing, but how? I mean, is it absolutely freeing, or is it a little bit overwhelming as well? And how do you navigate that without getting discouraged at the onset? And that's just my, I don't know. I get kind of trepidatious, you know, seeing a huge mountain in front of me.
100%. I get what you're saying, Dan, and it can be if you're not structuring right. So, for example, Dan, you would be focused on social media. And you are not just putting videos up on TikTok. You've got some goals, like, right? If you were to put up a TikTok video and it was viewed 150 times, and the next 12 videos were only viewed 150 times, there's a chance that you'd be like, I'm not sure that I'm investing my time properly. Maybe I need to do something else so that I can see a certain amount of views. What is a good view for a specific video that you might put on TikTok at this point for you?
At this point, if it's under maybe 3,000, it's kind of, you know, scraping the bottom of the barrel. I've had videos that sometimes they have like, you know, 200 or 300 views, and somebody reaches out to me and ends up trusting Christ. There was one particular video that happened. So But it's hard to be watching numbers and be in the social media game and not get discouraged when things don't perform well. But you know, and I'm just trying to navigate all this because I know that I need to be setting goals and being ambitious in those things, but just trying to find the time to do all those things as well.
Okay, absolutely. So let me address a few things. First and foremost, if you are finding it, if you're struggling when it comes to the emotional side and spiritually, like I'm not feeling like I'm measuring up, the best thing I can do is offer the book, Stop Trying by Carrie Schmidt. It's a fantastic book that discusses how to make sure that you're emotionally and spiritually grounded so that you can properly move forward and set and achieve ministry goals. So that's first and foremost, you need to be there before moving forward. Secondly, the best thing then to do is be able to ask, what are my actual goals for that? So let's say social media, you say, man, this video only got 300 views, but we saw somebody reach out and receive Christ as your savior. Well, at this point, you actually have a SMART goal there, SMART. You have somebody that is, it's attainable. You have it that it's relevant to what you're doing, and you have it measurable. Somebody trusted Christ on with that. So I understand that there's actual benefit to what I actually accomplished. Can it be overwhelming? It can only be overwhelming if this, Dan, if you at the same time have a goal to produce so many videos, and also you're going to try to build a church to 500 people in the next year, and you've got to dig a pool in your backyard, and also you're going to do 3 marathons, right? So goals can become more of a burden in your life if you're not very strategic and intentional about what goals matter most to you and your calling.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say set aside a day that really you can talk to God and say, God, you've created me. What goals should I have for this next coming year? Then when you bring in an accountability partner, a coach or a mentor, or somebody like my deacon, they can begin to say, okay, why do you want to accomplish this goal? Why do you want to accomplish this goal? And how does it relate to your purpose? So that's where I would begin. The best way to answer that question is don't establish too many goals in your life. Keep it narrow, keep it focused to exactly what you're called to, and then start looking at it quarterly. So if you begin with just 4 goals for 2022, awesome. And how can you attack those 4 goals? 1 for the winter, 1 for the spring, 1 for the summer, 1 for the fall, and then start establishing it that way. Good question.
Amen. Thank you so much.
No, not at all, Dan.
Andrew Montgomery, why don't you unmute yourself? You've got a question that I think is a great question. Why don't you ask that?
Yeah. So Josh, as far as like the goal setting day, you're getting alone, you're spending a day, just you're praying, you're setting goals. Would you make that a at some point in that day, you know, where you're bringing in maybe some of your church leaders and you're working on those goals together, or is that just like solitary, totally you? How does that work?
I really like to just be me and just spending time with God. I really want to hear from God. So in that day, it's not like I'm sitting there with the Bible on a couch for 12 hours. I like to go for walks. I do this at a place called Ironwood in California. But really, you can do this. I know people will go camping by themselves. They'll get away in a hotel room, whatever it might be. Or you just stay the day at the house and you say, I'm not having any meetings. I'm just staying here. Or I'm going to go to a Starbucks. I'm going to put earbuds in and I'm just going to focus. I like to just spend the time with the Lord because I ask God, I just say, God, I need to know what you want your servant to do next year. And I've got these categories. Lord, what do you want for my physical life? Okay, I haven't been good with my Sabbath. I need to be better with my Sabbath. Okay, I'm going to have a day of rest for myself and my family. And that's a major goal. And for some of you, that might be the goal for the spring. Like, that's it. That's the goal between March, April, and May. My goal is I will be faithful to follow the Shabbat. I'm going to take that time for myself and my family. We're going to turn off the TV and we're just going to spend some time with the Lord. Awesome. You've achieved that goal. So you've got personal goals, and then you might have ministry goals. That's where we've been focused most of our effort, but that's what I really wanted to establish by setting out the categories. It's important for you to get alone with God and say, God, what do you want from me as your servant this year? And he might really address an issue in your life that you would not get addressed if I talk to you, right? I might look at you and be like, okay, here's 3 goals for practicality. And I have no idea that your relationship with your wife isn't what it needs to be. So God might say to you, here's your goal. You need to have a date night once a week throughout 12 weeks in the summertime. You'd be like, well, how will that help me build a church? And the answer to that question is you'll be a strong Christian. And building that strength is more important to God than you building your church. So that's why time alone with the Lord is most important. And then becoming very clear and say, okay, I'm going to, and then you write those things down, and then you present them to your team and say, I think this is what God is leading me to do this next year. I think this is how it plays out in your life. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously there'll be some goals though that would be, maybe team oriented, even, just husband and wife goals. If you have family goals together, where, do you have a separate day where you're just, together working through those things, or, does she have a day? Do you have a day?
That's a great question.
That's what I'm more wondering.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer to that plays out into how you schedule out your weeks. So if in your week or your monthly calendar or your quarterly calendar, you have a time to meet with your deacons, or you have a time to meet with your pastors, or you have a time to meet with your wife, if you've scheduled that will play out in the next meeting. So for example, my wife and I have a every other week meeting time. Every other week, we've got 1 hour scheduled where we sit down and have a one-on-one conversation about schedule and about responsibilities and about goals. And so I know after my scheduled daily annual calendar prep time and goal prep time that I'm going to sit down with her and explain those things. I also have a similar meeting with Fred and with Jason, with my deacons. And over the next 2 months, all of these goals are going to start playing themselves out and expressing themselves in these other meetings. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, that's good.
I like to keep that day with me and Jesus. And then I like to begin to develop plans from that and present it to my team, individuals alongside. So actually, same thing happens here with the ID network. I will spend time thinking through goals for the coming year, and then I'll be able to come to my team, Jeremy and Kylie, and say, all right, these are the things I feel like we're supposed to do this next year. How can we accomplish these things? The leader sets direction and vision, and then you've got a competent team around you to help execute what you could not execute by yourself.
Great.
Another question?
James Kephart, why don't you jump on? You've got a question. I think it's a great question. Why don't you unmute yourself and ask that question?
Sure. So just thinking on the larger staff, do you work with your staff to come up with staff goals, church goals? And then in that same concept, do you align your own personal goals with those? How do you guys go about doing that as a church?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we do, James, is I establish some ministerial goals for myself, and then professional goals for myself and ministerial goals for the entire organization. From there, I tell our team, I really want you to begin establishing your annual goals, and I want to see them. And then from your annual goals, I want to know what your quarterly goals are. So in the same way that I have a one-to-one with my chairman of the deacons, I hold one-to-ones with my pastoral staff. Now our church is larger, so that there are certain pastoral staff members who hold one-to-ones with their staff. And in those one-to-ones, 6 weeks in the middle of the quarter, we have those quarterly catch-up one-to-ones, where in the midst of the springtime, in the middle of the spring for us would be April 15th. We're sitting down. I'm sitting down, let's say, with Pastor Caleb, who runs all of our next gen ministries, which for us, that's nursery, children's, youth, and young adults. And I say to him, okay, fantastic. You know what our broader goals as an organization are. What are your goals for the upcoming summer? Now, I already have his spring goals because we talked about that in the middle of winter. So he's in the midst of working on his spring goals. What I really want to know now is, how are you doing with your spring goals? Great. And how are you doing when it comes to establishing goals for the summer? And then I allow them to establish those goals. I want them to get away with the Lord. Based upon what I've said as a direction and vision for our church in the next year, what does that mean for you and all that you're responsible for? Bring those goals to me. What we do during those 6 weeks is we like to call it negotiation of the goal, right? So he says, man, if you want to see this pastor, if your goal is to have this, we want to see this many first-time guests. And for us in youth group, what that means is we want to see this many first-time guests in youth group. And then we say, oh man, that's great. What does that mean? Well, that means you might have to have a new promotional. It might mean you need a new budget. It might mean that you need to grow by 15% in a quarter. Is that actually attainable? Maybe it needs to be a 12% growth, not a 15% growth. But I really want them to have the same wrestle that I've had. And I found early on that if I establish a goal for somebody else and say, I want you to do this, it's really hard for them to own it. But when they spend some time and pray about what my goals are for my ministries and my responsibilities, and then I present them early enough to my pastor or to my supervisor, and I present them and we agree and we negotiate, what does that goal look like? Then once it's agreed upon, there's a lot of motivation to accomplish that goal. Does that answer your question, James?
Adam Pearlstein, I believe you had a question. I see that his camera's off though.
Yes, I'm going to be driving my son to school in a second.
Okay.
I just had a quick question, and that is when you're talking about specifically the ministry goals. I know different people look at it different ways, but how would you balance the look between setting work-related goals, like we're going to invite this many people to church, stuff like that, versus results goals? You want to see this many people actually in church versus a certain number of people saved, whatever. How do you get that difference? Do you tend to focus more on the work goals or the actual results of those goals?
Great question. I'm so glad somebody brought this up, Adam. Both. The answer is yes to both. So oftentimes what we will do going into a new quarter is establish, most of my guys will come in with 2 goals for the coming quarter. So let's say right now it's the middle of the fall and we're going into the winter season. For the winter season, a lot of times the guys will have, and I will do the same thing, have a work-related goal and a results-related goal. So the work-related goal, for those who are trying to understand the distinctions, the work-related goal for Dan Bergman might be, I'm going to put out 10 videos. I know I can do that. It doesn't matter if anybody watches them, 10 videos will go out. My results are going to be, I'm hoping to produce a few videos that have over 5,000 views each. I want 2 videos that have over 5,000 views each. So for me, for us, we can say, okay, here's a work-related goal. We are going to mail out 100,000 invitations. That is a work-related goal. It's going to take money. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. I'm going to mail out 100,000 invitations. The results goal is I want to see 50 visiting families within a 3-month span. That's a result. Now, what I'm able to do because of that is I'm going to say, I wonder if my work-related goal was able to produce the result that I really wanted. So now I have 2 goals that I was able to accomplish based upon my work goal and my result goal. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
James has an
thank you.
incredible question. I love this question. James, why don't you unmute yourself, jump on and ask this question, because I think all of us are going to deal with this as leaders.
All right. How do you deal with criticism with your goals? I'm sure not everyone, even in your church, may agree that your goals are attainable. I understand stepping out on faith. Everything we do should be done in faith. But how do you deal with the criticism when you receive it?
Yeah, it's a great question, James. I'd begin by saying in the first couple of years of the church, 2004 to 2008, I made a lot of mistakes as it relates to setting goals. And the way it worked was I would set the goals, and I'd pray over them. I was convinced. And then on January 1st, I would get up with our church and I'd be like, all right, here's the goals. We're going to buy a church van and we're going to go door knocking and have 20,000 doors knocked. And we're going to do all these things. And everybody's sitting there like shocked. And I always thought there was this cool moment where I was like a game show host where I'm unveiling the goals for the year. And my most of the church, 80% were like, this is awesome. But my 20%, which are the leaders of the church, were sitting there like, thanks for letting us know. Thank you so much for letting us know we're going to spend $24,000 on a church van. I remember that was a specific big problem for me. And early on, I remember a couple of those guys sat me down and like, hey, look, it's okay to let us in on what God's telling you to do a couple months before everybody else. That way, whenever they have questions on how we're going to do it, you come and talk to us. So the answer to that question is my criticism goes down greatly as long as I begin to bring the right people in at the right time. So, for example, one of my goals next year is to raise $3 million for the second phase of the facility that we built. Well, my goodness, we've been working on this since the spring of this year, and already we're having conversations with the big givers of the church to sit down with them way prior to anybody and sitting down saying, hey, look, I need to raise $1.5 million before I ever even let the church know. What do you think about this? What advice do you have? And how much can you give to that project? And so we've already had major gifts come in and major promises come in because I've sat down with people ahead of time. I think the criticism will decrease rapidly and has for my life, as long as I'm bringing people along and letting them know this is what I think God is doing, and I want your counsel and advice. For us, the way it works in our church is structured where we have a lead team of pastors. I should say lead team of ministers within our local congregation. We call it the lead team. These are the 4 people that sit on this council: myself, Fred Murray, Jason Combs, and my wife, Heather, where we make decisions together. And then from there, we have our advisory council, or what we call our board, where those are the legal trustees of the church. And then we'll go to them and we'll say, hey, these are what we're thinking. Then from there, I go to my my pastoral council, all of the pastors involved. And then from there, I go to our deacons and I explain everything to our deacons. And so the way we're structured at this point, I really can't set a goal. I genuinely can't, and try to accomplish that goal where a lot of people are going to get upset. At least people that, I hope you don't take this wrong, nobody takes this wrong, the people that matter most. So I'm going to have people sit out in the congregation and be like, I just think it's ridiculous we're building a building. Well, by the time we get to February 13th, where I'm going to announce that to the broader church, the person that is just finding out about that on February 13th, honestly, it doesn't matter what they think. Because I've already told 50% of the congregation already knows. I've already had conversations with those who matter most to the essential nature of what we're doing. So I don't receive a lot of criticism unless I've received that criticism face to face or within a small group before we ever get to that announcement. Does that make sense, James? Am I anywhere near answering your question?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just letting people know and not surprising your leadership. Last moment, it really solves a lot of that problem.
Hey, Josh, you know what that does as well? It helps us as leaders not make reactionary decisions. Get a good decision on Monday, and come Sunday, we think it's such a great decision. Let's throw it out to the church, when we've not vetted it, and it protects us from making those foolish decisions as well. And the other thing, what you're doing is you're showing us the value by doing what you just said of planning and thinking things through. And it really protects us from making dangerous decisions where we're like, this is faith, and everyone else is like, no, this is foolish. So I think that's a great way of presenting facts, is you've got levels that you're giving it to before the average church member hears it.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'd love to hear more from you on this. Just this last year, I had a huge problem with this. We're building this facility because I made mistakes as it relates to this, even in 2021. Early this year, I approached, after speaking with all my pastors and our lead team, I approached our board, the trustees of the church. And I sat down with them and I said, okay, this is what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to take our basketball court. We want to build a gym over it so we can have a temporary space for our children's ministry before we build, and our parking lot before we build our final phase. My trustees, who I trust implicitly, looked at me and like, why are we wanting to do this? Pastor, we want to follow your vision, but have you thought this out? And they really began to poke at all of the ideas that we had spent the last 2 months developing. And we walked out of that meeting absolutely 100% convinced this was the wrong goal. In fact, they came away saying, you haven't shot big enough. What we need to do is build the second phase. We don't need to raise $1 million for this temporary structure. We need to raise $3 million for the final structure. And bringing it to them where I was genuinely challenged, and they said, I don't think this is a great idea. Well, 10 years ago, I would have gotten in front of the church and been like, all right, I had an artist render out a picture of what this gymatorium thing is going to look like. And I would have gotten myself into some deep problems. But letting these people know ahead of time has really helped. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on this? I know you've dealt with this for many years.
Yeah, I think what you said really sums it up. I think all of us come up with great ideas, and we give it to the church first before our leadership. And our leadership it's a great way to vet things. And I've had great ideas, but they've needed to be tweaked. And so the vision still gets accomplished, but how we go about it and how we present it. I love to talk to our guys about it. And you have to have tough skin, because if you surround yourself with people that are the right type of leaders, they're going to poke holes in it. And if you just say, but I'm in charge, and it becomes a pride thing instead of really what's best for the local church. So I would challenge everybody, put that guy that challenges you in every area, like that's who you want to talk to first. Because if you can answer his questions, you can answer everybody's questions. And don't be afraid of that. And if you can't answer his questions, go back to the drawing board. It doesn't mean the vision isn't right. It just means the timing of it could be wrong. Your way of presenting it could be wrong. How you're presenting it. I mean, there's a number of things, and you just can't be inward focused when it comes to presenting vision. You have to understand how all those levels are going to perceive it, because you have to get everybody involved. If you can't get, if you can't, all the way down to that person that comes on Sunday, if they don't see themselves sitting in that new auditorium, then something's wrong. And so every level you give it to, they see their part in it, from the biggest giver to the least amount of giver. You want them to see themselves in that vision.
Yeah, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, the big goal next year is I need to hire a staff person. Maybe you're a youth pastor, you're like, I need an admin assistant. Maybe you're a pastor and you're like, we need another pastor. You've really got to make sure that this is from the Lord, and then begin getting your leadership around that. And there will be all sorts of hard questions. If you've surrounded yourself with good people, they will not be yes men. There are going to be all sorts of great questions. And there's an understanding, relationship. I want you to ask me the hard questions because other people are going to ask me the hard questions. I want to have what those answers are, so that you're ready whenever those questions come. Great statements. What other questions do we have as it relates to goal setting and achieving those?
Josh, do you let your staff help you set those goals, or how do you come up with those goals and then give those to the different levels, or do you get feedback before you take that day away?
Yeah, before I take that day away, I think that's a good question. Where I'm at is sometimes I can't see everything below me. I can only see the layer below me, right? I only see my direct reports. And so with that being the case, sometimes, did we stop? Are we live? Okay, good. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I can only see what I can see. So sometimes I'm going to have to go a layer or two down and say, okay, what's the big problems going on in our church, and get some feedback, and then allow that to kind of stew. But the type of decisions that I'm coming to are going to be, I don't like to get super mystical about this, you know, like I went on top of a mountain and God told me type of moments, but genuinely there is an element of, I'll tell you, one of our major goals for 2022 is we have restructured what I'm calling the OS of our church, the operating system. We are dealing, the way I'm approaching our church right now is, I said there's the software and the hardware. Excuse me. There's the software and the hardware. The hardware of the church is we need a new facility. Sorry, my father keeps calling me. There's the software and the hardware. The hardware is our building needs to be built. The software is what is the operating system that's going to fill that building with people. Our process in the past has been membership classes that lead into small groups, and it's worked wonderfully for us, but we're entering a new phase. And I haven't talked to the Idea Network at all about this. I want to see how it works within our local church before I do, but really shifting our complete OS. I mean, this is a completely new operating system for us going into 2022, where we have a heavy emphasis on one-on-one personal evangelism and one-on-one personal discipleship. I know it's not the newest thing. It is definitely newer for our church, not something that we focused on over the last 11 years. But the process that we've developed, I'm very excited about. Now, how did we come up with this? By spending really genuinely a lot of time looking at the church for the last 18 months since the beginning of COVID, and realizing the dangers we have as a church in not implementing deep personal conviction about my walk with Jesus Christ. So all of that has led to a realization of this need, which then I began to bring to my staff, beginning with my direct reports, and then talking to all of the pastors, talking to the deacons, talking to the trustee board, and say, I believe our biggest problem, the biggest hole I see as the leader in our organization, in our church, is that we do not have dedicated disciples. I cannot create dedicated disciples in 45 minutes every other week with the amount of people that are showing up. Those people showing up every other week, 45 minutes, I can't do it. We need a new operating system, which means we have to let go of some things and we need to add some things to our church. Once I was convinced that one-on-one personal discipleship is going to be our new operating system, then it became my responsibility to explain that properly and get challenged and see if that conviction remained true, and then begin to decipher what that looks like. But that's an 18-month thought process that led to a 6-month development process that is launching in our church on January as well. I'm not sure if that answers much of that question, but yes, I do consult them before making some of those decisions, asking them what do they see the biggest needs are.
You know, Josh, everyone has a different personality. And so your personality, I can see you taking vision, what you want to do, your goals, and presenting them in a very positive way. Not everyone has that ability. Some of us maybe just not as outgoing, or just not able to tell a story the way you tell a story. How do you think, and maybe someone else can speak into this as well, if you have a different personality, how do you cast vision, set goals, let other people know without sounding defensive, without coming across almost like negative? We're doing this because this is bad, or because you are bad, or because, does that make sense? And maybe I'm seeing some guys shaking their heads, so maybe I'm speaking to a different group of guys than maybe your personality here, but they're visionary, innovative thoughts, not mean dictatorship because things are bad. Does that make sense in that question? And if you don't feel like you can speak to that, Josh, maybe somebody else can.
I will say I hope to be optimistic. I hope to be positive. It doesn't always come from that place. In fact, when it comes to the building project, I specifically had one of our trustees look at me and say, Josh, you're telling us that we need this building because of some ideas that you want to implement when it comes to discipleship. Can you not make the same argument that we need these facilities based upon what we've already done? And he used the word, he said, you're being very negative about what we have been doing, but in fact, what we have been doing is been giving us a 10% growth rate already. What you should do when you have these conversations with these donors is you should be positive and say, look at what we've already done and look at the growth rate we already have, and show them a positive view of the future, not a negative view of the future. So even with me, I've had to, I wrote those notes down and I put them in my presentation. I've been memorizing how to say that so that I can present it to people who are our donors, our largest givers, and say, look, we're really excited about where we are already trending. It's very exciting. We got to see more people saved and more people discipled. And this is how we plan on doing it. But if we do this, we're going to need a bigger building. And so anybody else have that same issue, needing to focus on that?
I don't know. I could speak for a second, I guess. What we've typically done here is whenever to meet the criticism, so there's not doesn't come across negative. I'll sit down with the leadership in our church, the spiritual leadership, and we'll just have a frank discussion about the general spiritual health of our church. What do we need to work on? I'm sorry if there's a background noise. I have right on the other side of the wall, my building's getting power washed. So that's that buzz in the background. That's what that is. So we've had some great conversations that way, but then everyone on leadership is on board with, well, then how do we fix this? And then we're all going the right direction, as opposed to me just informing them, hey, this is what we're going to fix.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's I think we begin with sitting down with the leaders of the church and being able to say, what do you guys see as the greatest spiritual need? I think that's important, but I also think we ought to be like an attorney, that we kind of already know the answer before they give the answer. Because otherwise they're going to give us the answer and set direction. If I sat down with a lot of the men in our church right now and say, what's the greatest spiritual need in the church? A lot of them would say, we need to have weekly militia runs with our guns, because the whole world is about to turn, and we need to make sure that we're prepared to defend Las Vegas against the communists. And so what that would mean is our annual calendar and our weekly schedule is going to include militia runs and gun practice. And this is what they see as the vision. So I have to kind of know what the answer is before they set the agenda. Otherwise, I'm going to be buying a lot of camo. How many of you know what I'm talking about, right? These guys are ready for the world to end. So I think that's been helpful. We're running out of time, Kylie. I'm realizing this right now, and I'm sorry this conversation has been going. Do you want me to promo what's coming up in the next couple weeks? Okay, she's getting me a thumbs up. All right, guys, great conversation. If you want to continue it, give me or Jeremy a call on these things. We'd love to discuss more. We're really excited about the upcoming month, in the month of October. In the month of October, we've got some great roundtables that are coming out. They're available to our members. Let's see if we can go ahead and show that slide at this time. Now, if you're not a charter member of the organization of the Idea Network, I believe our oh, here it is. Let's see. Caleb Sargent next week is going to be talking about targeting and reaching young adults. Really, the theme of next month is longevity in ministry. How can I make sure that my ministry is a long-term ministry? And how can I make sure that what I'm doing is impacting generations, not just a few people? So longevity in ministry begins next week with Caleb Sargent, targeting and reaching young adults in your community. How to do so. Do you actually need a young adults program if you're a smaller church? And how can you assign young adults, and how can you reach young adults within a smaller church context as well as a larger church context? The week after that, Dr. Gary Coleman. Dr. Gary Coleman is a great leader, Baptist leader who served the church for many, many years. He's going to talk about start strong, finish well. Start strong, finish well. How do you have a ministry that lasts decades? And how do you keep from burning out early? I'm really excited about hearing about that. And I want you to be bringing practical ideas into the small groups as we break out. Tim Christensen is going to be leading a session on October 19th called Handling Cultural Fights in the Church. So what does that mean? I mean, when we have racial tension, when we have political dissension, how are we handling these cultural fights within the church without splitting the church? And then Kurt Skelly is going to round out the month on October 26th with one called The Best Is Yet to Come. Having a positive mindset and a positive outlook for months and years to come, and how to project that. Not just project it, but genuinely feel it so that you can be authentic in your presentation. That's all throughout the next month. Now, if you're not yet a member, an official charter member of the Idea Network, we want to encourage you to join. I just, if I'm not mistaken, I think we closed out membership on Idea Night. And so you can't become a member, but I'm going to do a little audible here and make Kylie upset. If you're here today and you are not a member, and I think this is all I can do, once I do this, I'll be in trouble. There is no official membership openings until January, and these roundtables are for our members only. Plus, there are a bunch of other perks, such as the event in Austin coming up. By the way, man, I'm excited about that. If you would like to join the membership and you're not a member, today and today only, Kylie, this is what we'll do. Today and today only, if you're on this call and want to become a member, contact Kylie. Kylie will onboard you. You can be a member between now and the end of the year and start being part of that. We don't want you to miss out on next month. Lastly, guys, let me tell you, we're really excited for you and for your ministry to be coming out to not Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Texas. We're really excited about that. What Kylie has planned and what she's presented to Jeremy and I, and what Jeremy and I have begun thinking through as it relates to this event, it will be the most unique event we've ever done. It's going to be a little bit posh. It's going to be posh. It's going to be nice. Where we're staying and what we plan on doing, because it's such a small group of us, it really is going to be a nice event for you and your spouse. So I hope you come out to that. Hope you make plans, and those more details are coming up. I think we already have the dates established for that. Well, it is 12 o'clock straight, so we want to let you out in a good time. We are going to see you next week at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will see you there.